Do you have questions about cleaning and removing mold? Today's show is here to help with a 40 years plus industry professional. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. What a blessing to be here with you.
I'm so thrilled to have you here. I'm plucking you out of semi-retirement, and we're going to use that incredible body of work that you have done over the decades to help people feel like they have more agency, more literacy around when you think you've got mold. It's such a minefield. But as I was looking you up, you actually and your company have dealt in all sorts of remediations of toxic substances, not just mold. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more as well. But I kind of want to ask, because it feels like it's all happening now. Is it just that there's an awareness that our buildings can make us more sick, or do you believe our buildings are also getting more toxic?
Actually, the quick answer to that is probably both. And as you said, I've been, and sometimes almost like Don Quixote, early in my career, talking about indoor air quality and arguing against, some of the contaminants or how to deal with some of the contaminants a little bit more effectively. But it goes all the way back to the genesis of the asbestos industry, and then I cut my teeth there, and then lead and radon and indoor air quality, chemicals, infection control, all the way through, and of course mold and things like that. But the fact of the matter is that there is distinct similarities between some of these indoor contaminants in terms of how we address them. And then there's wild differences, so that if you try and apply something exactly from lead, for example, to mold, you're likely going to have some problems there. Although there are, certainly things from the lead arena that we can apply. So it really is a fascinating journey for me, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I think my expertise goes way beyond mold, and I oftentimes deal with clients where we find out that the mold may be contributing, but may not be the main contributor to their issue. So had one a little while ago where, and I'm sorry, I'm prattling on just a little bit, but, there's cross sensitivities, and that has become so imbued in me in terms of watching for this, that most of the time it's the mold is the primary one, and then they become cross-sensitive to chemicals, or they become cross-sensitive to electromagnetic fields, or all sorts of things, right? A couple of weeks ago, it was the exact opposite of that. The mold is what was in the news, and this woman thought that was causing her problems. And as we worked with her and was talking with her, it was actually chemical exposure in her house, which was causing the primary sensitivity. And then the secondary sensitivity, of course, is to the mold, because once your body systems are screwed up, it doesn't matter what it is that screws it up, right? Once your body's not functioning on that square level, so to speak, then all sorts of problems can cascade from there.
Yeah, absolutely. My Chinese medicine doctor talks about how we are a castle when we're healthy, and things can chip away at the crescelations and kind of wear us down. And once you're exposed, any army can come in and benefit from your weakened state. And I really think that's such a great analogy to help you understand, why am I sensitive to everything all of a sudden? It's because the whole system is weaker.
Yes, and I want to thank you for pointing out about your Chinese doctor, because that's something that I have promoted. I'm not a physician by any means, but what I do understand and what I've seen over the decades is that there's a whole bunch of different modalities that help people depending on where they are and what's bothering them and things like that. So, when somebody says, well, what do you think about the crystal mats that people lay on, and that's supposed to help them, and it sounds like voodoo and blah, blah, and they're expensive. And the answer is, again, I'm not a physician, so I'm not going to give medical advice, but I've seen too many things like that are non-traditional, non-Western medicine be helpful to people.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And I just,
Um,
giving people drugs to cure them. And I understand that even in the mold arena, there's different binders and things that we give, but just going the route of big pharma many times doesn't appear to be the best case, in my opinion.
mm, yeah, it's there for save the day. I mean, antifungals can be amazing, but I agree. Like, if you're also talking about rebuilding, refortifying a system, that's not something that Western medicine tends to be the best at anyway. So that does tend to happen in those. It's interesting you use the word traditional. I kind of think of Chinese medicine as way more traditional, given it's been around for, well, how many thousands of years? But yeah, exactly. I think we often just grow up with what's normal in our culture, and so we go there, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to be perhaps more beneficial or at least complementary.
Well, and I don't want to sound too negative, and I don't want to pick on my doctor friends or anything like that, but it's just like contractors and everything else. I mean, there are doctors who know what they're doing with, mold sensitized individuals, and there are doctors that do not. There are contractors that know what to do with molds, impacted houses and offices and stuff, and there's contractors that do not. And, you know, this is just, if I can tell a short story.
Yeah, go
Years
for it.
years ago. So, I think I'm really onto something here with the mold, and I've got to get this message out. And so I spent a lot of time talking to the allergists in the whole region where we were, which is up in Southwest Michigan, and the reaction from most of the allergists was pretty cold. And one of them actually said, this is a quote. He said, but if we, put them in touch with you and you fix the environment, then they won't come back for allergy shots.
Oh, wow. They
And it was
screw
like,
up the prescription model.
yeah, I said, well, yes, that you can put it that way, but isn't that the goal? We want to get them off the allergy shots, and he did not answer that somewhat rhetorical question of mine. So
Yeah,
this is
wow.
an actual statement from a doctor.
That's awful. It's awful. But it also proves that the model of practice is also the wrong model if it's not about trying to get people well in the long term.
Right. And, no doubt they've got a practice to run, and, how much money they put into their education and all of that. I understand all of that. But when you lose sight of the patient and what's best for the patient, and you start thinking of it in terms of your business, it doesn't matter whether you're a consultant or a doctor or a contractor or a non-traditional medicine person or an equipment manufacturer. There's great equipment out there, but sometimes that piece of equipment isn't for this customer. And yet the equipment manufacturer will say, well, our stuff always takes care of everything. You know how that goes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Well,
salesmanship.
let's talk about that regulation, and just how many shades of gray there are in we fix mold type companies and claims. Because on one hand, I can see that regulating an industry that's somewhat cowboy, where you really don't know what you're going to get, and people can say they're certified, but then you find out it only needs to be one person in the company who's gone through the certification for the business to be able to say, there's so many issues with how unregulated it is. But then on the flip side, if we regulated it, who gets to decide? And then do we do it the same way for everybody? What if it's not going to work for that person that way? As you said, how do you feel as an industry professional of like over 3 decades about that gray area and trying to get the best outcomes for a more consistent level of care and actually fixing the problem, not just either covering it up or getting rid of a few things on the surface?
So first of all, I'd have to say it's a great question, and it's one I've spent literally, I think, at least a decade thinking about and trying to adapt my position in the industry to make some sense of that. And the best answer I can come up with is this, is that a lot of the mold remediation that's done, certainly in the United States and in Australia and other countries that I've, have some experience with, is done at least okay, if not well. But, and the caveat there is for the non-sensitized occupant. And so the minute you add in somebody who has had their body system damaged by the mold, or the mold is, like I said, we talked about earlier, cross contaminant to something else that's damaged their system. The minute you add that in, that's a whole different level. And so, there's just, again, my opinion, I know there's great contractors out there that if you've got mold in a bathroom or something like that, they set up a great containment, they'll do the removal properly, they'll clean that bathroom, they'll use whatever, system or chemicals that, they're most familiar with. And generally those jobs are done very well. The difficulty is that that's a standard mold remediation. And a sensitized individual can't get by with just a standard remediation. So now we fix the source, and it's in the standards. I'm sure you're familiar with the S520 and everything, but that condition 2, which is the, extra spores that are distributed from the condition 3 area that's around the house and everything. So that bathroom has been mold contaminated for 4 months. We clean that bathroom. That's great. That's what everybody's paying for. Maybe there's some insurance coverage. Maybe there isn't. All those things that play into this. They do a great job there. They leave and the person is still sick and they think, well, that contractor, pardon my expression, that contractor sucks. We didn't fix my problem. And the answer is, well, not necessarily. They fix the source of the problem, but there's too many of them that don't appreciate the extra level that they have to go to with sensitized individual, nor does until they're really, really sick and really do some, work and get a hold of somebody like you and see some of these programs and stuff. Too many of the sensitized individuals or their spouse or somebody that's in the mix there, maybe somebody who isn't sensitized says, well, I'm not going to pay $10,000 to have my whole house cleaned. That's crazy. This is a $3,000 remediation in the bathroom or $4,000, and they want another $10,000 to clean my whole house, another $12,000. And the answer is, yeah, because it's a whole house. It's a lot of work, and they're going to do it right. But if they did that, they'd spend that 12 plus that 4. They'd spend 16,000. Just using this as a rough analogy. And the person gets better as compared to spending the 4 and then going back later and having somebody else come in. And
well, then you just spend the 16,000 on personal health care and never getting well.
Yeah, and now we've got to bring a mold dog in, and now we've got to do this, and now we got to do that, and you end up spending 12 of that additional 1,000 on more testing,
research, yeah.
of, and that was the funny thing. A lot of my clients, quite honestly, would look at me like, don't you do the testing? Don't you sell testing? Sure, yeah, we do. Why do we need it? Here's the situation. Here's what you're experiencing. You've already told me your symptoms get worse when we get in the living room, kitchen, fill in the blank there. Clean it. Why do I need to test it if your body is telling you that you don't feel well in the house? What test is going to be more sensitive than that individual who is telling me that they can actually feel where where some of the problems are?
Yeah, it almost puts a lump in my throat because I'm one of those people. Yeah, yeah. And it's really hard when you have been sensitized and you are that person. And I appreciate we have some science now on the psychoneuro hypervigilance aspects of chronic sensitivities. But I can tell you when there is mold in a room if I have to sleep there for a few days, or I just know. I can feel it. My central nervous system feels it. My heart feels it. My sinuses feel everything just goes, oh, yep, there it is. And so what is that extra level of cleaning, Michael? Like what are the agents that are used? Like how do you truly clean a space for the sensitized individual?
So the first thing I would say is that, there's a physical aspect to it. And although I appreciate a lot of the chemicals that are out there, I appreciate a lot of people that have fogging agents. I mean, there's chlorine dioxide, there's all sorts of stuff that we can use. Um, there's a salt solution. Concrobium has food grade salts,
Oh,
and
I
they're
love concrobium. That's been one of my
mold
favorite
control.
discoveries. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of trying to be non-toxic while you're dealing with these things, there's different levels that you can deal with. Um, but if you substitute the quick and the dirty, well, we're just going to fog this or we're just going to spray this, for the hard work of actually removing the spores and the mycotoxins and the fragments and the endotoxins and all the different things that are out there that are as a result of this water damaged, mold contaminated area, going back to the previous example that was in the bathroom that then spread up. If you don't get rid of that, I'm not aware, with all of the good contractors and all the good manufacturers I know and all the good stuff I know, I'm not aware of any magic bullet that actually where you just fog it and it's going to take care of it without cleaning it.
Yeah. And so what does cleaning look like? Are you talking about like getting every single item? Is it all like what does the actual process look like when you don't leave a stone unturned?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that it also is a matter of just using a little common sense. And I talk about this in my class all the time. So take me, for example. I've got my clothes are in a bureau drawer. The majority of my clothes, I've got some hanging up in the closet and things. Well, the things that are hanging in the closet, if that's an impacted area, you probably need to clean those. But quite bluntly, how often and for how long do I open the drawer where my socks are? 30 seconds a day while I pick up the socks, and maybe 2 minutes, after they come out of the laundry, and my wife or I fold them and actually put them away. I mean, that drawer for an entire week is probably open less than 5 minutes, right? I don't ponder my socks. It's like,
Yeah,
a pair of
yeah.
socks or a light pair of socks, right? So do the sensitized individuals have to go to that level? Do they have to pull everything out of their bureaus? Do they have to pull everything out of every cabinet? You can see like the office here behind me in our home office. Do we have to pull everything out of here to clean it as part of a detailed mold remediation? And the answer is it depends on the individual.
And I guess with your example of the bathroom, it could also depend on how far away the bathroom, like if it's the ensuite of that room, then maybe. But if it's on the other side of the house and it's just a tiny bit of trail contamination, maybe not.
Right. And the key, though, is the broad, flat surfaces. All right. Walls, floors, ceilings, countertops, the front of the cabinets behind me there, that sort of stuff. Because that's, where the dust is going to collect. It's going to be, static electricity. It doesn't look dirty, and I hope it doesn't.
No, no, all good.
Yeah. But on a microscopic basis, when we go and take a tape sample, if you've had that contamination, like we've been talking about in the bathroom down the hall here, it wouldn't be unusual to find a little bit on those, cabinet fronts there. So broad, flat surfaces, and they need to be cleaned. And quite honestly, HEPA vacuums is not the best cleaning method.
Ooh, what
Well,
would be?
see, the HEPA vacuums are designed to get the gross debris.
Yeah.
And
They're a good day-to-day cleaning tool though, still, right?
they are, yes, you
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
want to, because you don't want to just keep
Yeah, I don't want
recycling.
everybody thinking they have to throw out their HEPA vacuums.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
no, all good, just clarifying.
we're talking specifically about the detailed cleaning for the sensitized individual, like the whole house cleaning. And, the HEPA vacuums is the first step. And as you said, very useful as your day-to-day cleaning tool so that you're not just respreading the small spores and the mycotoxins and things like that. But if you actually get into the science, particularly how the mycotoxins work and some of the other small fragments and things, they have for lack of a better term, I mean, there's all sorts of scientific terms, but I'm just going to call it static electric cling. It's probably the best way to think of
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it, right? So they cling, they're tiny, they don't have a lot of mass to them. And so when the vacuum brush goes over it and that goes to suck it up, they don't have enough mass for the air to actually release it from the surface. So the cleaning tool of recommendation from our end, and it's been that way for at least 5 years, if not closer to 7 or 8 years, the microfiber cloths, and we really, really recommend the disposable microfiber cloths. The washable ones that they use for cleaning cars and things like that, those are good, but by the time you wash them a few times, you've actually damaged them and they're not picking up like they should.
They
So,
need to have that static intact. Is that what you're saying?
well, that's it. If you
Mm.
actually look at how a microfiber cloth is made, it's really bizarre. I think the science is amazing. There's two different types of thread or yarn in there, and they're, essentially lined up kind of next to one another, if you will. So the one has like a positive charge and the one has a negative charge. So the negative particle gets picked up by this piece, and the positive particle gets picked up by this piece. So, like I said, that's why we recommend the disposables, because when you take them out of the package, that ability to attract all that stuff is intact. And then once it gets filled up, even if you wash it or shake it out, you're impacting that static electric charge, again, for lack of a better term. It's van der Waals forces and all sorts of things in there if you really want to be specific about it. But
Yeah, I'm
that
sure there'll be some nerds out there taking
it just goes over people's head.
taking a dive. Yep.
Yeah, makes me sound like I'm some,
No, I know. I just think it's like we struggle in the low tox space because if you are low tox and unwell and chronically unwell due to these sorts of more complicated environmental issues, you can feel really guilty using disposable stuff that's made out of petroleum and just like chucking it in the bin. And I really have compassion for that moment, but I always remind people as well, nothing is black and white. And you are of no use to yourself or anybody else if you are literally in the fetal position on the floor and unable to live. And I think you got to get well. And it's okay that that's not always going to be amazing, sustainable, recyclable, reusable choices. We are trying to get that mold out of that building right now. And then go do your fantastic tree planting activities on the weekend and, minimize your plastic around the home. Like there's a million ways you can do a great thing once you feel fantastic again. And are we putting anything on the microfiber cloths? I see some professionals recommend like a sticky, just a simple Castile soap type, to really make it sticky. Or are you going nude microfiber cloths over the surfaces?
For the most part, I like your term, the nude microfiber cloth.
Like just nothing on there.
Yeah, and I would say if you need a cleaner, and remember things are going to be different. So when I'm doing ceilings and walls and cabinet fronts and everything, that is countertops. For the most part, that's just nude. Just do them. Make sure when you use microfiber cloth that you put it on a mop pad or something. You don't want to just put your hand on it, because if you look later and there's, a dirt pattern in the shape of your hand, that's telling you that you're only using like 5% of the surface of the cloth. The other thing is that when you put it on a mop pad or some sort of holder, that microfiber cloth, you always want to take a Sharpie marker and put an arrow on one edge of the holder, so that as you're cleaning, you're always moving in one direction. You don't want to go like this, all right? Because then you're cleaning and you're moving back. So then you're picking up a bunch of stuff on the microfiber and then you're leaving 10% of it behind when you move back. So it's always that S pattern that goes back and forth.
Ah,
And
okay.
the simplest way to do that, like I said, is and I'm surprised the manufacturers haven't done this with their mop heads and stuff, but just take it, like I said, take a Sharpie marker, put a big arrow on one side, and that's your leading edge. And then you clean with it that way. And the good manufacturers always put their mop heads on a swivel, right? So that you can make that turn real easy and keep everything going in the right direction. So they know what they're supposed to do. In my opinion, and I'll have to talk to my manufacturing friends over at Comtech and tell them that they need to do that. They could
Yeah, good
bust that
idea.
in their plastic pretty easily.
Yeah. And Michael, a lot of people live in towns and regional areas on properties in the middle of nowhere where maybe they can get a neighboring town professional to come and, remediate and clean out the bathroom and waterproof it and retile it and do all those things. But they'd probably be hard pressed to find professional mold cleaners, right? Like that becomes tricky in regional areas. And I'm sure you have helped people long distance know what they might be able to do themselves. And what you're describing there with the nude microfiber on the mop and doing the ceilings and walls, would you be like, can we just run through the non-sensitized person in your house could go in and do this kind of regimen for cleaning so people feel empowered to actually think, oh, wow, so I could technically save money if I learn how to do this, or I could actually do this for my partner or my kid who's sensitized because there are no other options. Like those people come up a lot and say, I just can't get anyone out my way.
Right. And part of well, first of all, you're absolutely correct. People can do it themselves. And I know that this stinks because we usually tell the sensitized individual that we do not want them doing the cleaning, just because
Oh,
even if
definitely
you,
not.
even
Yeah.
if you put it on a 3 foot pole on a mop head, your breathing zone is, 3 feet away from where you may be disturbing it. And as good as those microfibers are and everything, you're still going to put some of that up in the air. So, but one of the other things that we've done, if you don't have that partner or family member or somebody or friend, I mean, we've had all sorts of situations like that where they just, a church group have heard about the person, being hurt and needing some help and come in. And I mean, talk about, exhibiting Christ to somebody who needs some help. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Um,
Yeah.
but the other thing that we've talked to them about is just call the Molly maids and don't just hire them, call them and talk to them about what you want them to do. And it may be that the sensitized individual has to purchase the microfibers and the mops and that sort of stuff, 2 or 3 of them perhaps, and then bring them in and talk to the cleaning crew about how they're going to do this.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you do all the research as the sensitized person, and then you do the really detailed brief.
right, right.
Mm.
And there's plenty of videos out there. The company that I recommend, and I don't know if I can say this on your.
Of course you can. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Um, and I know that they do distribute into Australia and New Zealand and stuff, is Contec, Contec. They're huge in the hospital space because they developed all of this for the infection control side. So remember way back at the beginning of the conversation, I said some things apply from one industry to this, but some things don't. Well, a lot of stuff from the infection control side really makes a lot of sense for the mold sensitized individual. So Contec, they have a line of products called Primera. That's going to be the mop heads, smaller mop heads, disposable, microfibers that go on there. And it's a really neat system. There's others that are out there as well. What I wouldn't do is, and again, I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I'm just telling
Oh
you where.
no, this is your opinion and you are entitled to it. Go for it.
Yeah. I'm not trying to dog anybody, but I would not go with like the Swiffers or the generic Swiffers. if you look at those claws as compared to one of these contact or one of these other ones that are designed for the healthcare industry for the infection control, the ones that you see for the infection control are probably 3 or 4 times as dense.
Mm.
And so that's going to give you a whole bunch more little um,
Stick.
openings, if you will,
Yeah.
for the small particles to pick up.
So
So
not all microfiber is created equal.
right. So and then cost wise, if you're doing it right, does it cost you any more to use on a room 5 good microfibers as compared to 25 Swiffers? Because if that's what you're going to use, you need to change it out way more often because it gets loaded up faster than the other ones. So I don't think, or I know from our experience doing those sorts of comparisons for people, there isn't that much of a cost difference. It's like we talked about before. It really goes back in my mind, and I tell this to my clients all the time: do it once, do it right, be done with it. That's going to be the most cost effective, and it's probably going to be the most helpful to your health.
Oh, I love
Don't
that.
keep, don't keep circling back around because, and I'm not trying to tell people that they just have to spend a whole lot more money or anything like that, but it's a lot of times it's like anything else in life. As I said, get the quality, do it once, do it right, and then um, be done with it. And if you mind, I'll show you where that comes from. Years and years ago, when I first started in the safety profession, I was a volunteer firefighter. And the first captain I had on the fire department, his theory was go big, put it out, go home. I think that's what influences my.
The spirit of that stayed with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 40 years later, I got to give credit to my fire captain. There you go.
Well, there are always those people. I'll share one from my very first boss. She always said, planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. And I've just always remembered that. You really want to plan. And like, so in something like this, of course, you want to plan, you want to research, you want to make sure using the best quality cloths, and you're going to really align with the person who is coming to clean, that they understand the brief and they're not going to take shortcuts, and that there are medical reasons it has to be done this way. Like if you feel more confident, even get them to sign something, like really be thorough. I think we often, especially when you're unwell, I've experienced this myself, where you're still trying to be nice and just not be too much of a burden because you're so used to being a burden. And I think you have to advocate for the right job being done here.
Well, I think it goes deeper than that. It's not just because you don't want to be a pain to somebody. Um, they're wore out. My sensitized clients, I mean, they
Yeah.
don't sleep.
You,
They don't
you
sleep
literally just
well.
don't have the energy to, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So to have the energy to follow through on these things is a huge issue as well. That's why, oftentimes if there's a family member or a spouse or somebody who's not impacted, and somebody we can educate so that they actually believe a sensitized individual is not just faking it, or you know just so many things I've heard in the past about actually being disrespectful of their own spouse and stuff. This
Mm,
is
it's huge. I coach in complex mold illness to just help people separate the wood from the trees, know who they can trust, build a bit of language. But the number one thing people say is, can you help me figure out how I can convince my husband this is real? Or can you help me figure out how I can convince our fire warden? I actually had a firefighter recently, and he was saying the wall fell in, and you could see the mold in the drywall that fell in on where they were sleeping. And they literally just wanted to just put more drywall up and paint it. That was it. And so it's a real challenge for people to convince other people that it's a problem.
and I do want to emphasize, like you said, that a lot of times it is the female that's sensitized and the male that's not, but that's not always the case either. I mean, we had what I actually wrote an article about it a few years ago. situation where the husband, I mean, was just debilitated. He would go to work and he would come home and all he could do was sit in his, chair in the evening, and he just couldn't do anything else. And, the wife wants to go out and they want to do this and they want to do that and they want to take the kids here and there. And he just does not have the energy, and really kept telling her there was something wrong with the house. Well, she's the keeper of the house, right? She's being impacted by it. And so she's, a little irritated that he says
Yeah,
that there's
almost
something wrong with the
defensive. It's
house.
like, am I not cleaning well enough for you? Or, yeah, it can create a lot of friction. And I think we just have to remember that it's the people we signed up with for life. And so let's just actually have some compassion and hear what they're trying to say. I'm very lucky. My husband's not sensitive, and he is our go-to guy for when the shit hits the fan in our family. Because my son is mildly sensitive and I'm very, and he has remediated closets where an air conditioner has leaked. And I've told him exactly what to do, and he just gets in there and does it. And I just feel super grateful, because not everybody has that experience.
Right. And this couple that I was talking about, where the wife was disrespecting the husband a little bit, what actually turned it around is that their first child was a girl, and as she grew up, she didn't have any problems. Their second child was a boy, and by the time he was 2, he was exhibiting the same symptoms that dad was, just lethargic in the afternoons, and wouldn't go better when he, went out to daycare and things like that. And when the mother realized that there might be something environmental that was impacting the child, I remember her,
Sometimes that's what it takes. Yeah.
yeah, I remember her calling me and crying to me on the phone because, I'd been in the conversations with her and her husband and trying to explain this to them, and she just wasn't buying it. And then months later, she's calling me and crying because she's now recognized those symptoms in her son. And we got the house clean. We didn't do it. We're consultants. We helped her, her and him get it sorted out. And they did much better. Everything was said and done. Both the husband and the son were well. But it was fascinating in that case because, like I said, typically it's females that seem to be a little bit more sensitive. And in this case, the genetics was going in the opposite direction. It was the husband and the son. And just to finish the story real quick, as they were going through the cleaning and everything, the mother-in-law came over and was, of course, going through all of that. And then she realized that that was also the problem that her husband had. So it was 3 generations. It would have been, grandfather, father, and grandson, all on the male side, and none of the females had that.
Yeah. I mean, my grandmother, we're from Mauritius on my mum's side, a tropical island near Africa. And my mum tells the story of how at the end of the summer, when they would leave the beach house and go back into the town near the tea plantations are notoriously wet and humid and moldy. My grandmother would come over with a depressive state and there'd be mold on furniture inside because the house had been locked up for a couple of months in the summer. And I'm convinced we are passing it down. And you do see, I had an auntie who passed away a few years ago. She was bipolar, depressed, but no one ever thought environment, with either of them. And I just think I feel so grateful that the penny is dropping and we're actually starting to think about how we can support people, because we've often just in the past discarded the person for being crazy because no one else is sick. But there is a
Exactly
genetic
right.
component.
And that's the term that's used. And this goes back years and years ago. I don't know if you've ever read or heard anything about Dr. Eckhart Johanning. Have you
Yes, yeah,
ever heard
yeah.
that name? Yeah. So 25 years ago, I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Johanning and actually convinced him to come and be a keynote speaker at a conference that I was chairing. And back then, he was talking about those percentages that have held up over time. And now that we have the genetics to be able to,
To
track
pinpoint
it
it.
through and
Yeah.
everything. So about 20%, maybe as much as 25% of the population, and that varies by population group. It seems to be less on the Asian side, but more on some of the Caucasian sides and things. But about 20 to 25% of the world's population have the genetic variation that makes them more sensitive to mold on one of the genes of the two that seems to create this. And about 3 to 5% have both those genes that are a little wonky. So I don't want to call them defective. I mean, that's just how we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but just like some people are prone to high cholesterol, and we don't blame them for that. We treat them. We explain to them where you're coming from. Or some people, high blood pressure runs in your family, so we need to be more careful with you than somebody else. Well, we should be thinking the same way with the mold sensitized people as well. And when you track it back to the genetic, and now that you can actually have like I said, the testing that helps people understand that, it's a huge step forward.
It's a massive step forward because you have that evidence piece. Huge. I want to talk about then we've done the cloths on the ceilings and the walls. You mentioned concrobium. When does that then come in?
Typically, and I was going to jump back to this, so you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not going to let anything go. Yeah.
have you done this before? I'm thinking you might have some experience with
400 odd times. Yeah.
this. Yeah. So yes, chemicals being used with the microfiber cloths primarily on floors, and that's if the floors are have something on them that needs more than just a physical wipe. And we always
So when you say floors, does that mean more than something that needs a physical wipe? Are we talking carpets, or are we ripping up all carpets ideally?
well, yeah, carpets are not going to respond to the microfiber cloths.
No,
So
of course not.
you're back to HEPA vacuums and multiple passes with a HEPA vacuum. If they do it right, there's very good success with carpet cleaning, hot water extraction. But make sure it's a truck or a van mount, because that's going to be a lot hotter water and it's going to be a lot more suction coming out than using the portable ones that they wheel in with the tank and everything, or that you rent from the hardware store or the grocery store or anything like that. Those leave way too much water in the carpet.
I was going to say, I mean, I
Yeah,
remember a real estate agent saying when our air conditioning leaked and my husband ended up doing the remediation because we just said, you guys can just stay away with those suggestions. Thank you. Goodbye. She said, but we would have carpet cleaned. And, when you're on the top floor of a no lift building, that means one of those heavy little water machines that's just going to make the mold problem like billions of times worse because of
yes and
the
no.
moisture addition.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's situations where you can't use most of the professionals that I talk to that use truck or van mount carpet cleaners tell me that's 2 or 3 stories maximum. They could get the hoses up and have the right suction in the water and the heat and everything. So if you're in a multi-story building and you've got carpet and stuff, you may be forced to use one of those portables. But there's a whole science of drying, people. So to think that you can go in and clean these carpets and then, yeah, well, just turn on the air conditioning and in 24 hours it will suck the extra. No, it won't. But there's dehumidifiers and there's fans, and they actually have to treat that carpet cleaning almost like a small water loss and get it dry. Because again, if you clean it and dry it within 12 to 24 hours, the likelihood of any sort of mold growth is going to be very low.
Yeah. Well, that's reassuring. So bring in a good either commercial or at least a 50-liter dehumidifier that's got a powerful motor and dry the room out properly.
And somebody who knows how to use it, somebody who actually is going to have like a pin moisture meter so they can get down into the pad of the carpet so they can read it and make sure they're leaving it in there because the top of the carpet will feel dry. Oh yeah, this is like Sahara Desert dry.
Hmm.
But you go down, particularly a really nice carpet, a plush carpet that's on a good pad, uh, that can be, the reality is it can be an inch and a half to 2 inches thick. Well, yeah, I want a pin moisture meter down in there telling me that it's dry down to the subfloor. And that may take an extra 12 or 24 hours, but that's still better than leaving that damp down there because 3 weeks from now you're going to smell the mold.
No, thank you. And so would concrobium then be something you could mop a hard floor with? Would that be where it'd come in?
Yeah, although I would just spray it. Anytime we talk about using a chemical, whether it's concrobium or Contec has a citric acid cleaner, there's a lot of good ones that are out there. But any of those that you're going to use, typically we say get it in a small spray bottle, and when you need to use it on the floor for spots and or you just want a better cleaning on the floor, spray the floor. Don't spray the mop head, and then
Because
realize.
yeah, it's something like concrobium, like it's an encapsulator, a membrane sort of situation happens, and then you're removing it essentially with everything it encapsulated. Is that
Yeah,
that's sort of how I understood it when I first learned about it, but I could be wrong.
yes, it is. I don't like the concrobium for the cleaning with a microfiber mop because, like I said, it salts. And so when you're spraying that, there's microscopic particles of salt. So what are you doing? You're putting something on the floor that the microfiber mop now has to pick up. And so you're filling the microfiber mop with the salts rather than filling it with the, residual mold or whatever else of that material is on the
So are
floor.
we back to the nude microfiber mop head situation for hard floors first?
Well, you can, but again, if you need some additional cleaning, you just use a different style of cleaner, one that is a chemical rather than a dilute, particulate solution. So in that case, like I said, citric acid cleaners. Um, uh, there's other acids. I'm trying to think. Of course, is escaping me right now. But dilute acid solutions and things like that will cut through the grime. um, of course, you can always use, the hydrogen peroxide style cleaners are going to be on the alkaline side rather than on the acid side. Uh, but just about anything that doesn't have a particulate in the solution will be your ticket to a solution that you want to use on hard floors with the microfibers. You don't want to overwhelm the microfibers um, with the salts and stuff. So one other thing I've got to mention here, as long as we're talking about that, that rules out all of the quaternary ammonium compounds.
I was going to ask about that. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Because
Well,
of the
quaternary
salts.
ammonium
Yeah.
is the same sort of, well, chemically, I'd have to talk to my friends about that. I'm not sure if well, it might be a salt, but I know it's a particle of some sort. And there's been fascinating studies in the hospital where they measure the amount of quaternary ammonium compounds in the mop water. And then they, because some of the systems there in the hospitals for wet mopping, they fill a bucket and then they just stack a whole number of the microfiber claws in the well of the bucket. And then as they put their mop head on it and take one out, they clean it, throw it away, and then they keep going down. And they've done these studies where they showed at the beginning, and I'm just using round numbers here, there's 1,000 parts of active ingredient in the water. And then they put all these microfibers in, and by the time they get down to the third or fourth one, the residual water has 300 or 400 parts instead of 1,000, because those microfibers have actually absorbed and held on to the quaternary ammonium. It's actually, if you want to do a little bit of research on that, all you have to do is punch in quat binding. See all sorts of articles about that. And the hospitals and the healthcare facilities are all over that now because the quaternary ammonium compounds are primarily what they use. And yet now they've migrated to these microfiber mops. And when you take the two and you add them together, it's like all of a sudden we got two good things, but when you add them together, they're actually a negative rather than a positive.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And so I keep coming back to then, like, why is concrobium good? What are we actually going to use it for if we're not going to use it on the mop on the floor, not going to use it on the walls? Is that for
Right.
cleaning objects?
Well, the concrobium, a lot of times we use that as a post cleaning. So you clean everything up and then you lightly spray the concrobium on it, and not enough so that you end up leaving a white film, because you can spray too much or you can fog too much, but you put a little bit on there, and then it's another one of the products that are out there that protects your surfaces and keeps the mold from growing over time in the future. So our thought is always, remember I said, do it once, do it right, be done with it. Do it once, do it right, be done with it. But if you can also add a step in there that keeps you from having to do it again,
Yeah.
at some point
So
down
it
the
acts
road,
as a preventative.
yes. So
Hmm.
concrobium, in my mind, is more of a preventative. I'm sure they would argue that it's also a
A
curative,
cleaner. Yeah,
but
yeah. Mm.
but for me, it's a little bit more of a preventative. So
Mm.
that's how we recommend people use it.
Okay, nice. Like we've almost been on the right track. So I feel like, cool, that's a refinement piece there. We just need to adjust when we're bringing that in. Mm.
And I just want to mention this too. If somebody is talking to you about something in the mold arena, particularly for a sensitized individual, and they can't explain it so it makes common sense,
Hmm.
then you want to be very careful. A lot of the buzzwords, and if the first thing they do, like I said a few minutes ago, is throw around, well, we need to defeat the van der Waal processes and all of that sort of stuff. That's just, yeah, that's just malarkey. Okay, they should be able to take this down, explain it to people, and then you can make your own decisions that way. And more importantly, as I said before, you can now start talking about classes of chemicals. So instead of saying, well, is this one product the one that I want to use, you just kind of back up and say, well, that, if you look at it, it's got this long name that says something 13587 quaternary blah blah blah. That's a quaternary ammonium compound. You don't have to be a scientist to
No, you
understand.
can spot it. Yeah.
You kind of spot it by looking at that. Whereas if you look at some of the other ones, like I said, the concrobium is going to be salts, the citric acid, the hydrogen peroxide. All of those are going to have different chemistry to them, and you can start choosing classes of chemicals, because we don't know, from a consultant standpoint, although with the internet, there's a lot of stuff that's available all over, but we don't know what's, most frequently available in Australia, for
Yeah.
example.
And does white vinegar sit in with citric acid as a class of
Well,
product?
vinegar is definitely an acid, and we often will recommend that. The difficulty is, as you might say, think, if you go to the grocery store, there's like 10 different versions of it. And I don't want to pick on any particular store, but you go to the discount store and it's going to be, 1.5% acid.
Mm. So
You
what is
go
the ideal acid figure that we're looking for
on
on a label?
vinegar. Yeah, on vinegar, you should be looking 5 or 6%
Yeah, I
on
thought so.
that.
Phew.
Um, yeah.
Okay, good.
And but seriously, I mean, it's essentially they're diluting it down because they're selling it at a really cheap price. And it's still vinegar, and it still meets, I don't know what the official definition of vinegar is, but it must meet that according to, here in the United States, the Food and Drug Administration or something. But yeah, for what we're trying to do, you need to get a better grade of some of the products. Same thing with hydrogen peroxide. People tell me all the time, well, I can't find a product. Can't I just go to the drugstore and get hydrogen peroxide and either mix that or use that myself? I said, sure, you can. Um, but I wouldn't even send you to the drugstore. I send them to the beauty supply store. Because the
Mm. Yeah, what
drugstore,
percentage are we looking at for hydrogen
yeah,
peroxide?
drugstore at the max, you're going to see 7, 8, nine
Yeah,
percent hydrogen
max.
peroxide, which is still pretty strong. But remember, it's used for wound care, so they don't want to, like, burn your skin or anything like that. You go to a beauty supply store, you're 20 or 25% hydrogen peroxide. That's, that's
Now we're
bleach.
cooking with gas when you're trying
Yeah,
to,
that's
yeah,
bleach or hair sort of
clean mold.
stuff.
Mm. Yeah.
So, and even if you don't use it at 25%, even if you cut it 1 to 1, get it down to 12%, that's still going to be a little stronger than what you can get out of the bottle there at a drugstore at even 7 or 10%. And it's most likely going to be a lot cheaper. So,
Mm-hmm. And is that the kind of thing we could then use to clean, like, I don't know, I'm looking at my workout dumbbells over there and
oh,
my,
absolutely.
so really getting a thorough clean on a surface.
Excuse me. There's that sneeze that
There it is.
all
It
that
finally
time.
happened.
Yeah. Yes, so that's the other thing. The hydrogen peroxide is going to be good against bacteria and the other microorganisms and things as well.
Mm,
So, yep.
awesome. Oh my gosh, I feel like we've covered so
Uh,
much cleaning ground. So good. Anything
okay,
we've
all
left
right.
out?
Hang on,
Yeah.
though.
There's
Remember with,
more.
well, hydrogen peroxide, you want to hold it in the original bottle until you're ready to use it. It's going to come in a brown bottle. It's going to be broken down, deactivated by light. So, if you're mixing it 1 to 1 and you're putting it in a quart spray bottle, put a few ounces in and then add a few ounces of water and then use that and realize that tomorrow morning, if you go and pick up that spray bottle because now you've got that much left in the bottom of it, that's water at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. So and it might smell like the hydrogen peroxide in there, but as far as it doing anything, breaking down the microorganisms or releasing the mycotoxins, which is what the hydrogen peroxide is really good at too, is breaking the surface mound of the mycotoxins so that the microfiber moths can pick it up. Yeah, that sits in there for more than a few hours, particularly if it's a light colored bottle like most of the sprayers are,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's basically just water at that point, smelly water.
Mm-hmm. Could a
So
dark bottle green, where I've got like a really dark, but or are you like, is the point here, mix it and use it and then it's done?
exactly,
Yeah,
whatever you haven't used, just dump it out. It's
loud and
not.
clear.
Again, I'm not trying to be wasteful. I'm not trying to
Oh no, we're trying to get people well
be
here, Michael. Yeah, we've
exactly
got to get
right.
this right.
Right. And as you said, I mean, there's a place for putting our ecological hat and trying to be, earth friendly and all of that. This is not the place to be quite as earth friendly on some of these things because, as we talked about, you've got a person's health that's in the balance here. So we don't want to have to go back and redo it just because we either neglected because we don't know how many people even know about that or heard about that they can't leave that in the bottle overnight or anything like that.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
education first and then follow through second.
Yeah, so good. Such good information. Can we talk about, and this happens a lot in when people are renting, and I live in a city where the rental is high. And I've connected with a lot of people over landlords and real estate agents and what they say they're going to do to come and fix a mold problem is. And, there's been so much gaslighting in my time, even. I was accused of not being good enough at cleaning my house. Our couches were going green. And they were screaming at me for being bad at keeping my house clean. I'm like, I clean every week. So, and I think like then you get the agent or the landlord that actually says they're going to do something. And I want to step you through a couple of common ones that get said and how we can empower someone to maybe ask a couple more qualifying questions or point out why they think it's not just a surface mold issue, but there's something in the walls, to really get better at pushing back, like it just, not being aggressive or anything, but just saying, unfortunately, what we've seen in this place is not going to be fixed by a surface treatment like fogging, let's say. So when someone says, don't worry, we'll send someone in to fog the place and your mold problem will be fixed, what are the top couple of observations someone could share or extra questions they have in that scenario to make sure that might be all that's needed, or to point out that that's not going to cut it.
Right. So and I hate to sound like I'm, um, you know, regulatory agent or anything like that, but one of the most effective things that we've seen over the years is to educate that landlord, that apartment maintenance manager, or whatever it is, and having a copy of the S520 and just going through those three definitions. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long deal. You just have to say, look, this is the document that pretty much worldwide is normally accepted as the way that we want to do stuff. And look at what we've got here. We've got condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. And condition 3 is source material, and condition 2 is the deposition from the source material. You're talking about coming in and fogging. You're essentially addressing condition 2.
Mm. Yeah.
And that may work, but if we skip over condition 1, if we don't find out where the source is coming from, and in a rental unit, it may not be their apartment.
Exactly. It could be upstairs or downstairs.
Above,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. So, that certainly complicates things for the rental people, and I feel sorry for them. I mean, I deal with them all the time. But we also have to educate them so that they understand before we do any fogging, we need to at least look around the common areas where there could be source material. If we haven't taken a flashlight, and that's, quite honestly, it's not as complicated as a lot of people think. Take a flashlight, move all the stuff that we store underneath the kitchen sink and the bathroom sink, because all of our hair products and all of our deodorants and all that stuff is in there, and use a flashlight, look around, check that baseboard on the cabinet, make sure it's not soft or that there's not something going on there. I mean, there's only, half a dozen, if that many, sources of water in an apartment. A couple of bathroom sinks, kitchen sink, shower, bathtub.
Laundry. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that complicated. Now, it is a few minutes of effort. You have to move the washing machine and, look back there and see how the connections are, make sure they're not leaking, make sure there's no mold on the bottom there that's hidden by the washing machine. You might need to, tap on the wall of the shower just to make sure that it's solid underneath the tile or the vinyl that's there. I mean, there's simple stuff that you can do to. The other thing that's really straightforward in the shower: pull back the ring that's covers up the hole where the the shower head, and use a flashlight in there and actually kind of look in there and see if you can see any black. Take a swab, and just a cotton swab, and run that in there. If it comes out black, it's like, you know what, we probably have an issue here with the source. And yes, and I'm not denigrating my fellow consultants and inspectors and stuff, and they've got all sorts of cool equipment we can use. We can use infrared cameras and drill small holes in the wall to do wall cavity samples and things like that if we need to. But quite honestly, it's mostly a visual with a flashlight. Look at the water sources, see what's around. If you can get through all of those and there doesn't seem to be any source material there, then the other thing I would say is talk to the sensitized individual, find out if there's a specific area of the apartment or the rental unit that they feel bad in. You say, well, it's bad, but I feel worse when I'm in the bedroom, or I feel worse when I'm in the living room. Well, bedroom and living room, there's probably no water sources that are supposed to be there. So then we start looking around, is it grade level outside? Is it, like I said, does the bedroom back up to the apartment next door? Does it back up to their bathroom on that side? A lot of times when you just narrow it down a little bit, there's a logical approach that people can follow to find out if there's something going on.
Yeah, and that's it's so empowering to have your own little investigation set. And I'll add a little blog I did a few years ago on visual clues. And I know you have a ton of articles that I've also grabbed the link for because you've got them neatly hyperlinked. And it's a great list because it spans both consultancy work, remediation work, and the personal work that people can do themselves. Um, so yeah, so good. And I mean, we could talk forever. I feel like there's a part two coming on, Michael, but I just feel so much clearer for people to actually start to have some agency even around what a good deep clean looks like after you've fixed a problem. That's just gold. So I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for that. This is just, like I said, decades of experience trying to help people with all sorts of indoor contaminants. And the reality is that many times it's not as complicated. I will say, however, sometimes it is. I don't recommend that anybody do like trauma scene cleaning or drug lab cleaning or anything like that. I mean, fentanyl can kill you with just a speck. And so there's things for the professionals, and there's things that the well-intentioned amateurs can do. And as I said, I would think the infection control stuff and the drug lab sort of stuff would be the ones that you want to stay away from. The mold, though, there's lots of things that people can deal with effectively just by being intelligent about it.
Yeah, so good. And so good to know we have professionals to help us when we are finding it hard to investigate or when there's a clean piece at a water source that needs to happen and we need to identify exactly how bad the damage is. For me, it's just all about everyone being more literate about what actually fixing and removing mold looks like, and then cleaning the finer surfaces afterwards. Because as a sensitized person, like if you don't do all the bits, then it's you can't be well there. So thank you so much for your work, Michael, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Well, thank you for having me on, and just again for all the work that you do in this field. It takes a whole group of people to make sure that we're making progress, and I'm thrilled to be able to chat with you
Aw,
anytime.
thanks. I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love, love, love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe. And I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.